So, Dana,
Hi, Charindra.
we are going to start something new today.
Yes, looking very much forward for this.
Yeah. And we have you as our first participant.
First participant.
Is that a good word?
I think that's a good
That's
word.
a good word. Yeah. First expert.
First expert.
So this series we are planning to continue and expand on it also, and like a weekly digest. So this week we can't obviously not talk about the elephant in the room.
I mean, in all meanings, right?
In all meanings, yes. All meanings, exactly. I use that very purposely. Right? So now we don't know what's going to happen going forward, but what are your initial thoughts about, from an economic point of view, right? From a government stability point of view, from a perceptional point of view, what are your thoughts initially?
I don't know, Charindra, whether I have like a very straightforward answer because...
and obviously I'm asking about
because,
Ranil.
But all this has
president.
economic implications directly or indirectly. I think there are two schools of thoughts which I can see, and even on the analysis, one side is this may give a clear direction to everyone that this government is not going to, they are not going to tolerate any corruption, and it has gone to the highest level because even on implementation there are two things. So if you start from like the lowest end, like some small government official that you arrest from a bribe or anything, then it gives an indication, okay, you are going behind the small fish. And now this has given like, okay, we are even willing to go behind the big fish. Of course, the politics of it, I don't want to comment, because whether it's a right accusation or whether it's a right way to do it, it's a different conversation. But in terms of a signaling, that's one school of thought. Okay, we are really for anti-corruption. That's why we have received that mandate. And even everyone, even in the IMF governance report was done, saying that corruption was one issue. Why Sri Lanka went, the bankruptcy, that is one main contributory factor. That's one way of thinking. One school of thought. The other school of thought is, of course, coming from the politics. Okay, now there is bond scam, there are so many other issues, and you have picked up on an issue which is, we are yet to see what is the determination from the courts, which is not the accusation that has been spoken before, at least to put it in that sense, because there were so many other, starting from the bond scam, there were a lot of other issues, public finance issues, mismanagement issues, misallocation issues has been discussed. So in that sense, whether it's a political victimization is another thing, and also with that, whether the politics of it, whether then, okay, you have now sort of a, united opposition, and then it can spill over as like small trade union acts and protest and all that, and then it spill over to the economy, is a different conversation. But I think there's no right or wrong answer here. We have to wait and see actually, because markets is all that, because it's based on the sentiment. But in a way, I think
today the market is down.
Yeah.
Right. So
maybe because of
that could have an impact, no?
Yeah, that could have an impact, and also how the geopolitics also looking at this, and also the investors, whether it's how they decode the message. Okay, this is an indication that this government is purely for like anti-corruption. We need not to pay any bribes, that they will stand for it. And on the other side, on the government, this will also be a real test, because I think they're completing their 1 year in few weeks' time. And actually people will ask like, okay, anti-corruption front, what you have done, and at the same time on the economic development side, economic growth front, what they have done. And also if there are any accusations for the existing government members, what's the course of action afterwards. So I think it's a real, I think the single word is a galauda satana again. There's like the real fight for both sides on what is going to happen. But my worry is this should also not deviate from the economic issues that we have been speaking, because we are not still out of the woods. So this should not because Sri Lankans are quite well known for, going in tangents with different conversations. But overall, I think this is a test, because it's not like, it is not that no one has been named as corrupt or like victim. It's still a court process which is ongoing. Of course, anyone can debate for both sides whether it's right or wrong. But I think in terms of anti-corruption, there's a signal being given to decode it, whether it's actually an anti-corruption one or a political victimization, it will come over a period of time. I think still the conversation is quite early to digest that. But it will have some economic implications. Let's wait and see how the markets would react to this.
Yeah. Now, what are what are the economic issues that we should be talking about at the moment that this is overshadowing, right? Because we have a looming debt problem coming, right? But at the moment, like, what do you think this week? There was a lot of talk about this, and there's a lot of political talk happening. But now, say for example, if we go into tourism, right? So we just got past a landmark of 1.5 million. But are we just playing that numbers game where it's purely about getting, crossing a certain mark and not worrying about the quality of the tourists?
I think, Charindra, there are two sides. One is the quality. The other one is what we need to really look at is not the tourist numbers. I mean, there's nothing wrong with looking at the tourists, like the number of arrivals, but actually it's the room nights that we have to check. Second thing is it's the quality, and also I think you and I had this conversation some time ago. That is, this tourism is a very sensitive area for if something small thing happen, basically you are again inviting for the entire ecosystem will collapse.
Yeah.
So whether are we putting all our eggs in one basket is another question. But the thing is, two sides. One is, yes, the tourism numbers crossing 1.5 million is good. But I think in terms of room nights, now what we see is a lot of Indian tourists are coming, which is obvious because of the closer proximity. But their average stay is fairly short compared to Netherlands and the Germans. So as a result, your overall average stay is slowly coming down because you are basically overshadowed by the big Indian inflow on one side, which is not bad, but they may not be the high spenders. So we have to have an active strategy on either to, extending their stay or like attracting from new markets, which the tourism campaign has to kick in. And even for Indians, I think that the other conversation that we could have, what we could have done was also on the casino thing that we discussed, because a lot of Indians come for playing casino over the weekend. So that also one reason why I'm not saying all the Indians are coming to play casinos, but that is a market that we can activate, which we actively contributed, recommending some suggestions to make, bring a better regulatory framework to do this. So tourism quality has to be improved, overall, and there'll be a limit that we can also cross. We cannot expect like a 10 million tourist inflow because our infrastructure is not developed to absorb 10 million tourists. So then we have to think about like the other infrastructure development, the capex expenditure that we need to do to really take the tourism to the next stage. But I think we are missing a big component by not not checking on the room nights. Because if you look at, I think the profitability of hotels, they are also, while there are some improvements, it is not really reflecting with the tourism numbers that is being picked up.
Yeah, and also are we actually going to hit our targets? Because if I remember correctly, our target for 2025 is 3 million arrivals and 5 billion in revenue, right? Where we are now, it doesn't look like we are going to reach that, right? And I think it's from the government side, I think it's a lost opportunity because, there's a lot of progress being made. But there was just so much potential coming into this year because elections are over and the stability and all of that. Promotional side, there's something missing.
Yeah,
right?
From what I heard was the promotion, the money is there because there's a levy that they charge from every tourist which goes to that fund, and that money is there. But I think the execution has been, because there has to be an advertising agency needs to come in, there has to be a process. I think because these are all very subjective, because all creative work, which is your area.
No, but that's the thing. So I think the promotional campaign has been delayed.
It's been delayed. It's been delayed. That's a sad side.
Yeah. So
absolutely, because that the positioning of the product has to basically has to prioritize. But I don't think that seems not happening at the moment for, I'm sure, various reasons.
What are the reasons?
I think what I heard was, because I was at some few TV conversations who have active stakeholders, what they said was this procurement process is delayed and it's not moving ahead, it's not going anywhere. And that's absolutely a missed opportunity.
No, I mean, so many governments have failed to do this, right?
Yeah.
And I think there was some optimism that at least this government could get it done. So.
Yeah. The other thing is, Charindra, the capacity issue inside the government. I'm not pointing fingers to like a political party. The government capacity is so weak. The process and evaluation can take like, they really do not have the capacity to evaluate such a campaign, whether this really, up to mark to attract tourists and whether this really would deliver the expected outcome. I don't think they have the capacity, the infrastructure inside the government. So I think that's what delays it. But it's of course, I think the one action I'm not sure about the regulatory framework inside the tourist board. Probably we have appointed many committees, but the minister to lead it and get it across, lead it in the sense the campaign, and of course it has to follow the due process. But this is a typical
scenario.
That's the thing.
Dana, like, why put a target, right? Unless you're absolutely confident about, and it's bad on the government, right? That's my point.
Yeah, but I think how this is going to, in my view, but of course, I have a slightly different view on that. The government won't get like a, damage in their reputation by not reaching the target.
You don't think so?
Because I think what would happen is the numbers are already much better than even 2018. Because already they have crossed 1.5 million, so they will not go to 3 million. They will probably end up somewhere in 2.5 million or 2.7 million.
Yeah.
So the messaging will come out, tourism increased as 10% or 15% compared to 2024 and better than pretty much before it rebounded for 2018. So in terms of a reputational thing, I think the government is safe, is my view, because what is going to come up is, we have done better than 2008. Even the export numbers, everything is going to jump. I mean, historically high value. It may not be adequate for us to cross the river in that famous quote by former president. But I think that won't be an issue. But of course, it may not be adequate for us to come out from this debt crisis. That's where we have to be really concerned about.
I actually think it will be an issue. You know why? Because the government is actually surpassing all other targets.
Is it?
All the other targets, the export target, it looks like, and then the tax revenue, all these targets, they're actually surpassing, right? This is the one target that they're going to fall short of. And I just think in terms of optics, right, if you're going to be touting the fact that you are beating your own targets in everything else, then the same logic applies to this, right?
Yeah, but I think you have a point. But from what I see, Charindra, now even the revenue targets and the export targets, I think their initial targets were quite long term, like in 2030 to reach to, I really cannot recall the exact number. How generally this is going to, you have been in media, know how this is going to position by the government, any government. They are going to compare it with the previous government and probably go back to before Easter attack and then show look, we have rebounded, and that's a signaling for the confidence. But there's a point. It can backfire. But I think overall, even if you look at, I saw some media promotions, of course, I think with the government reaching to 1 year of, as you said, what they have positioned is revenue was this amount, especially the Sri Lanka customs revenue. Now it is this amount, and tourism this amount. But if you really go to the details, there can be, because the customs.
I think the half-yearly targets, they're exceeding. Which means that most probably the full-year targets also they will exceed.
Yeah. But I think tax to the government revenue to GDP, they will come closer to that based on, I think, the vehicle import numbers. Because those revenue also comes, we need to understand, passing the cost to the consumer. I saw the customs have surpassed 1 trillion. I think now it's close to about 2 trillion, I think. If I remember right, they have surpassed 1 trillion for sure. So all because of the vehicle import taxes, which basically the common man bears, because even if you look at the vehicle import numbers, while people think like it's BYDs and Attos are the most popular, but actually the highest number of vehicles are the two-wheelers, which we don't spot actually, because in terms of a number, like a quantity, that's the highest number. Of course, in terms of value, vehicle contribution may not be big as like the rest of all the vehicles put together. But that's common man also getting impacted by this 100%, 200% taxes, like someone who is affording a motorbike. So it's ultimately the consumer bears it. That's why we generally recommend don't too much depend on the import tariff. Of course, we don't have another option at this point of time with the crisis. But I think government is, in terms of numbers, is safe. But where we really need to keep our eyes is what is going to happen next year and the year after. Because the growth momentum has to come. These are revenue measures. We have to depend mainly on the growth measures. That's where these industrial zones, the export diversification, things like that should take place, in my view.
Just on the cars, Dana, right? So you believe it's too high, right? The import tariffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the government's argument would be that if we lower it, one is there's going to be over congestion in terms of traffic. Then that's going to lead to other problems and all of that. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, no, first, Charindra, this congestion issue is I would say it's a misdirected argument, because understand, if there are more vehicles, there will be congestion. But to avoid congestion, taxing the vehicles is not the solution. You have to invest on public transport. There are no two words about it. Like, you have to invest on public transport to avoid this congestion issue.
The other one about foreign reserves. So
foreign reserves, yes. Again, that's also, not accurate, I would say, because we are not, one thing is we are not, as you know, we are not importing from reserves. It is, we are importing from from the export proceedings, the remittances and the service exports is where we utilize our to imports. We are not under any circumstances importing from reserves. But there's an implication, because if you really need to defend the currency, since the central bank is building reserves, there may be issue. But at the same time, then the government has to let go of their income target. Because in terms of their income or the revenue, that also coming mainly from the vehicles. So you cannot, you cannot save both sides. But
what is more important? That's what I think.
No, I think the vehicle imports is fine. I mean, I think it's higher. That's what I said. It's the tariff rates are, or like the excise duties and these tax rates are very complicated and it's high. But we really do not have an option, because government clearly said, even when we are imposing this high taxes, our main objective is to collect revenue. That's the main objective. It's not about anything else. Don't get us wrong. It's like the revenue. We need money because that's the easy way to collect money rather than increasing taxes. So in that front, it's too high. But what the lacking? The gap that I see is the lethargy on investing on the public transport. Because I think the budget president mentioned about 100 new buses and like having a separate company.
They are doing that, no?
They're doing that, but I think it can. It's not only the buses that we have to focus on, the railway and on the other choices and all that for someone to commute between 2 points. Those things have to have a different strategy, and also there are a lot of regulatory issues like the National Transport Commission, and then there are regional transport like timetables, CTB buses. There are safety. I think it's an absolute chaotic situation, which I think could have been a more sensible and tangible benefit for the passenger or like the common man, which I think could have, because what we saw was like train issues and strikes and things like that, and then you had that ticketing issue that came up. So I think public transport investment and the indication of the signaling could have been stronger, because now we are heading to the next budget. But from the previous budget, we hardly see that the main idea being materialized.
Yeah, because I read somewhere that we are one of the places which where it's most expensive to purchase a vehicle,
Yeah.
right? And then, like, here's my thing, right? Like, if somebody wants to develop their career and like become somebody who's wealthy, one aspect of that is having that car, right?
Correct.
I think we've had this discussion before also
Yeah.
about the aspirational value.
Absolutely.
Right? So right now, right, nobody is going to have that goal because it's very difficult, right? I mean, you have to become really, really rich, right? But somebody in that middle tier can't, right?
No, absolutely. So that's what I said. Why we should not tax it too high is because you are basically killing the aspirations of the aspirational Sri Lankans.
Yeah.
And everything else is also very expensive. And on the other side, Charindra, now when you are buying a vehicle, you have already to an extent paid taxes, like, based on your income, either 15% or up to 36%. You pay the taxes when you earn a revenue, and now we are paying taxes for a vehicle on, additional 100% on top of it. In the sense, like, for consuming that, you have to pay another 100%, 200%. That's too much. But again, the solution is not having everyone every Sri Lankan having a vehicle to commute to Colombo or wherever that, for their respective area. It is about giving people choices. People should have a choice to travel by public transport whenever they need. They can also own a vehicle and then they can commute. And also the other way to look at it is that the congestion pricing, like, the problem is, if all the vehicles starts coming into the city limits at the same time, then you have to make it expensive. Really putting economics into work. Okay, then if you're coming at the peak hours, that's very expensive to visit the city. But as you said, and as we discussed, housing, vehicles, your education, your professional education, by making it very expensive, you are basically distracting a lot of people to stay in Sri Lanka. That should not be the way. That's why I hardly stand for public transport as well as for more reasonable taxes for vehicles. And with that vehicle imports, Charindra, the energy sector has to be developed, because the future is, as we all know, it's EV and hybrid and green energy. So without having, because when you allow more and more EV vehicles to come in, then you have to have proper energy reforms where you can charge these vehicles from green energy. Then only you have like that, building that proper ecosystem.
Aren't they doing that now?
That's one main worry that I have, because the government, as I always say, they haven't done anything wrong. There are a lot of right things that needs to be done, but they haven't done anything wrong. If I were to comment on one wrong thing that they did, was amending that energy, the Electricity Act, because for three main reasons. One is what the structure that they have proposed is, there's three parts now in energy. You generate, transmit and distribute. And under this, you are basically keeping everything under the government control. Okay. That's also, you can argue there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is on the transmission. Now we are at a point, regardless of how much energy we generate, without upgrading the transmission grid, there is no point, because your grid is going to trip off. So their suggestion is to invest by the government, and the expected investment, as we saw on the media reports, about 5 to 8 billion, and some says 11 billion over the next 5 years. Charindra, there's no space for sure.
There's no way.
That's the problem. So without having that electricity reforms, you really cannot get that spillover effect on the industries, because the energy cost is already high. So then you're attracting these foreign investors to do open up factories. All that is become very difficult because your energy prices are already high, and for the next 5 to 6 years you cannot do it. And if you are thinking to borrow that money, that's also not possible, because then your debt to GDP ratio goes up, because it's already a government entity. And then you cannot also borrow it from the private sector, because private sector has a single borrower limit now. The banks have been given clear directions by the central bank that there's a limit that you can extend to a company, including the government. So there's a single borrow limit. With the CEB, it's difficult. The third option is you get a treasury guarantee. That is also not possible under the new Debt Management Act, because you have to get you have to do a risk assessment. And actually this CEB went for a 50 million loan from Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, and they were asked to pay 4.8% risk premium on top of the interest rate. So all three options are out. So what could happen is we will muddle through the same way. Okay, there will be three, unbundling will be done, which is good, which is the right way. They are decided to unbundle the transmission, generation, and even what we saw was they are going to send letters and all the employees will be distributed into these three companies. Main like three sectors, and out of in between also there are other companies as well, and they are going to divide it further in the next 2 to 3 years time, which is good. But investment side has been completely ignored is my view. And for existing assets, you can actually easily raise money because already that coal plants are there, there's machinery, you can bring investment. Bringing investment freshly to this is very difficult. I think the government's one argument that they floated was, okay, the cost, even the private sector comes in, they also will have cost of capital.
Yeah.
Right? So they said it's cheaper for the government to finance it through debt rather than depending it on the cost of capital by the private sector, which I have a fairly a different view, because the cost for the government actually under debt is, rather than it's expensive, that option is not available. There is no point. It's like a price control. There is no point, debating over a control price when the goods are not available in the market. So when there's no capital available in the market, there's no point saying that it's, available at a lower cost, because that excess is pretty much not available on one side. So that's if I were to comment very hardly and to rethink about the strategy, probably the electricity thing is not a good indication. In fact, we did a paper, but that's something that the government has to be...
Did you present it to the government?
Yes, present in the sense like we shared it with the energy minister, the power sector reform secretariat, and for all high powers, we basically shared it. Because
what was the reception?
They didn't... they provided some commentary on some other points, but not mainly on the investment front. Because our argument was on the three things that I mentioned. Yeah. And no one really commented on it, but I saw some commentary on a different comment saying that private capital would be expensive than the debt capital by the government. But the simple argument is the debt capital option is not available for the government to begin with.
So he was asked about this, an energy minister was asked about this recently in an interview. So his argument is that we have done so many things that seemed improbable earlier. So just watch us do this as well.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. No, I wish them all the best. I mean, if you can do it better. But the numbers doesn't match because 5 billion, 6 billion is already almost equivalent to our reserves.
Yeah.
And if you were to borrow it from the bank, the system, that means we have to have pretty much double the reserve purchasing done by the government, because who has to buy it from the system. So I think this could have been, thought through. Probably they focused mainly on the unbundling first, and then, unbundle it further at the latter stage.
So their argument, Dana, is that it cannot be given to the private sector for also national security reasons as well. Right?
Yeah, no, what we said was, no, okay, fine. If you want to keep it under the government, you keep it. But what we recommended was you unbundle it properly. Because now, Charindra, on the generation, all the three companies are under, actually four, the hydro, wind, coal and diesel. All categories are as one organization. The problem is the engineering to asset base to everything from wind to hydro are completely different. Even think of an engineer who is an hydropower engineer cannot work in the sense his skill set is completely different to an engineer who works at a coal plant.
Yeah.
And the asset classes are completely different. So what we said was, okay, you unbundle, and even if you want, keep the government ownership on the generation, but you properly unbundle it. But now you have everything under one cluster. It would even be difficult to get debt financing because, as you know, Asian Development Bank, World Bank, they all finance green initiatives. ADB has clearly said no, that they are not going to fund anything for like coal plants and all that. Now, when you have the coal plant and the wind plant together under one company, can they really finance this company? Because on your portfolio, you have a coal plant and it's not properly unbundled. So in that sense, even if you want like the government to borrow money from the multilateral agents or even a bilateral basis, it would be very difficult to finance it because it's under one. So what we said was, okay, if you really want to keep it under, keep it, but unbundle it properly. But ideally on the transmission grid, anyway, it was supposed to have the 51% ownership for the government. What they could have done was to raise capital. You open it up for a bit more because the government can keep the ownership. Of course, I do not agree that by keeping the ownership that the national interest would be secured, but I understand if it's a policy stance by the government, we respect that because it's a policy.
No, but a lot of people think that national security argument is valid, right? So why is it not valid, Dana?
It's not valid, Charindra, because if it were, I have two, a surface level argument and like a economic argument. If it was valid, now during the crisis, it was under government, no? There were no security at all. Basically, we did not have power for 12 hours. So if it was under government and if it was secure, then we should have done something during then. My other argument is by keeping it under the government, you are basically risking the national security. Because it's simple that you put all eggs in one basket. You are creating you are risking the national security, and now it is under one set of people, the procurement and everything, and it's also constantly the prices are going up, and that is a massive threat. And the thing is, to ensure the national security, you should also have the investment. Because next time it would be cyber attacks and things like that. To do that, you should be able to absorb the investment. Now, without investment, keeping an underdeveloped grid is a national security threat. What was said was, even because of this monkey jumping, it was tripped. That's if the monkey jumped and if the system tripped off,
was that actually the reason? I still don't know.
No, I think there may be some. Maybe it's a fact, but because if the grid is not stable and if the grid is not upgraded, even a small shock can basically trip it off.
Even a small monkey.
Even a small monkey can cause. If that's the case, then your priority has to be to upgrade the grid. And now, without upgrading the grid for next 4 to 5 years, aren't you like risking the national security on the energy? That was my argument. But if the government really wants to keep the national security, my argument was government they have the superpower. No, they can anytime. They can. They can. I'm not recommending it. They can. Seize any asset and they can do it. Of course, it will undermine investor confidence.
Yeah.
But you have that option. You always have if someone is, government is a monopoly of all bad things, no? They can take anyone to custody. They can take, charge.
Even former presidents.
Which I am not saying that. But you have that, powers to, if a private sector guy is, if he doesn't play according to the rules, you basically can, corner him, no? So in that front, the government has enormous powers. That's what you do as a regulator. And the other problem is, in this case, when you have this, rebundling or keeping it under the same clusters, the costing and the regulation also becomes very difficult. Because now the problem is the PUCSL, for them, it's very difficult to identify what is they can identify the generation cost, distribution and transmission, but it's not very clear cut. And the salary structures of the distribution, transmission, it's very difficult in this structure. But slightly unbundling it may not solve that problem entirely, is my view. And that's why the national security becomes an issue. Because the worst thing that we could do is keep a underdeveloped grid. If someone says, connecting with India is a national security threat, then we can have a separate conversation. Again, I'm not saying that, but then you can you can do the analysis for like the geopolitics and how the agreement has to be inked and what happens if India does something or something. But here it is like allowing the private sector to work, and the areas that the private sector is involved, I mean, there has been hardly any national security issues. I mean, the telecom privatization was done to an extent. I mean, do we see anything? And the world has evolved to an extent that you work with private sector, public sector together. So that's why I said you keep the important sectors under the government, because hydro under the previous act and the new act, it was always under the government. The national system operator is pretty much under the government, because they are the one who are basically buying and selling to the system. So I do know. What are your thoughts? I mean, what do you hear on the energy? Because that, I'm sure...
No, so on the solar front, I think they're actually focusing heavily on it. So China, right, is the global leader in solar. No?
Yeah.
So I think maybe they're taking a leaf out of their books, because there's a long running connection between the current government and China. No?
Right.
I feel like that could be one of the strongest points, Dana, because if they develop solar to like with floating solar and all of that, of course the investments need to be massive on this front, right? So I don't have the exact numbers, but even recently they approved this floating solar project got cabinet approval recently, right? Yeah. So I think that really to make use of Sri Lanka's natural, like the availability of sunlight throughout the year and all of that, this is something we can really, really focus on. Right, and that could actually, that could bring down the costs like crazy, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
So don't you think by the amendments to the bill, without upgrading, actually, then I see a contradiction in your argument, because you say for China to give that option on solar panels and all that, we have to empower solar, but actually what is happening is the opposite, because without an upgraded grid, you really cannot absorb the solar.
That's true. I'm just saying on this the fact that they're focusing on it. So then it comes down to like, are they actually properly focusing on it, or is it just paying lip service to it, right? So that's where it was not a defense of the government, but I think that it looks like they are trying to do something on solar that a lot of other governments were just talking about. Right. And I just hope that it works. What bugs me sometimes with not just this government, any government, is that if you have to have main areas, Dana, that you really focus on, and that can be your government's legacy, right? I think energy, now corruption is obviously going to be, the anti-corruption drive is going to be the main legacy of this government, right? But energy is going to be crucial going forward. So if they can really do it, that's why I'm annoyed with them about the tourism factor, right? That if you give a target, right, what we expect from this government is not that, to give a target and fall short.
Correct.
Now, they haven't fallen short yet, of course, right? But they are going to.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there I agree, because if they actually make the tourism target, then it would be like a massive, massive boost. You say, we told the target and now we have achieved it. Yeah. No, that I agree.
I feel like they're developing infrastructure, right? To a certain extent, tourism infrastructure.
Right.
But they're not developing the promotions, right? On the marketing front, I don't think these people are necessarily coming due to any sort of, there may be certain crowds, but I don't see a direct connection between the government's promotion efforts and the influx of tourists to Sri Lanka. I feel like this is very much social media driven. This is very much user generated content that is getting us, and that is the same way that we got tourists, last year and the year before. Okay. I just think that there needs to be a concerted effort on the part of the government to really, really put Sri Lanka out there on the map. Because, for all what we are talking, right, there are countries which are getting 50 million, 60 million tourists, right? So we are, banging our drum about getting 2 million, 3 million tourists. We need to aim higher. But also, when you put a target, actually work towards it.
Correct.
Right? Because this social media drive is what is getting us the tourists.
True. I agree with you. If you put a target, you have to work towards it. But I think the culture has been basically you put a target just to save your face in front of media, and then you somehow compare it with some other some target. But no, very interestingly when you spoke, it may be also, what do you think? Like, because Charindra, we haven't really worked on a framework with a massive tourism campaign massive communication campaign for tourism. It has, for a long time, it has been user generated. No.
So, Dana, the problem is, what is our positioning in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We were a land like no other, right? We were wonder of Asia, right? We were so Sri Lanka. We were there was another one.
Small but
small miracle approved.
Small miracle approved.
Small miracle approved because the whole small word was there.
Yeah, correct.
Right. So when I feel like, firstly, we have to figure out what our audience is going to be, what kind of tourists we want to cater to, because we are not getting the Maldives crowd now.
Yeah.
Right. Do we want to be like Thailand then? Right. Like a hybrid somewhere. What is our model? I don't see a model at the moment. It's like, if you want to travel, come to Sri Lanka.
Correct.
Right? We'll take anybody.
Correct.
Right? So right now we are getting a lot of young tourists.
True.
That's why down south and it's party central.
True.
Right? And it'll be even more party central now towards the end of the year.
True.
Right? But really, is that the long-term plan for us to get 20... teenagers and 20 plus 20 to 30 year olds, right? How much do they spend, right? And are we attracting tourists on the idea that you can feel like a millionaire here because it is so cheap, right? People who can't get by in their own countries can come here and they can afford a lot of things, right? In the sense that if they live like a local here, right? If they eat from the same places that locals do,
True.
then they don't have to spend much.
True.
Right? So I'm saying I'm okay with that also, but then that has to be by design. Right now, it's just what is happening organically. It doesn't feel like there is policy behind it. It doesn't feel like there is insight behind it.
No, that's I think was missing for some time.
Yeah.
But I think the other side of it is for the tourism, the cost of construction issue, because to make it affordable, because all these hotels and everything needs refurbishment every 5 years to attract that that segment of tourists. You have to really have the upgraded rooms, the options and things like that. So that's another way to look at it. The other argument is I forgot.
No, now there's in terms of segmentation, now there's a 7-star hotel coming up in Kandy, right? So I think the infrastructure will develop. I don't think we are positioning ourselves for that market.
Do you really think that our infrastructure is, because Charindra, if you look at the train services, the public transport, they are not coming in not everybody comes in private jets now.
Yeah.
So isn't it up to mark? Because even presidents, in his strategy,
you're saying it is up to mark, or
no? I'm not saying it is up to mark. That infrastructure, while it is important to have those hotels and everything, but it also, rather than the hotels, it's like accessibility, having
so, Dana,
activities to.
So my point is, Dana, you can't change the perception of Sri Lanka in 1 month, right? If you want to attract that audience in 2027, you have to start laying the groundwork now.
Oh.
I don't see any of that happening at the moment, right? It just feels like we are positioning Sri Lanka as a beautiful place where you can have a not so expensive
party.
Yes, great party, culture, beaches, mountains, wildlife, all of that.
Yeah.
But at a fraction of the cost that you would get it anywhere else.
True.
Right? And I feel like that is the positioning at the moment, and that's organic. I'm just saying that we shouldn't have a positioning that just feels natural. Is it well thought out? And that may be the positioning. I'm saying it is not scientific at the moment, the way it's done, right? Not just this government, every government. I feel like in terms of infrastructure, what we're talking about is, I feel like they are trying to, for example, simple things like toilets, right? Why would tourists go to a place where, the toilets are just like dirty, right? So simple things like that, I feel like these guys are focusing on it a bit more than previous governments. But without a promotional campaign, we are just going to keep attracting this kind of audience, right? And on tourism, did you hear about the protest plan for tomorrow?
No, I heard about it. Of course. Now, what I see is there's a trend of this protest now. So, okay, tomorrow one is, of course, with this court issue, or like not the court issue, but with, arrest of the former president.
Yeah.
But even before that, there was a railway strike. There was a postal services strike. Now there's a GMOA strike, the hospital service. So I think there's no. My observation is, Charindra, these are not very isolated. These are all very well coordinated now. So when there's a political issue, there can be different protests which comes supporting that bigger cause, or it could be also leading up to the budget. Because you want to pressurize the government to get the benefits that you want. So you slowly see every time when you are getting closer to a budget, there's this protest cycle comes in. So I don't know what it is. But this is that's why we generally recommend, by keeping this, big government, you really cannot do it, because every time you are getting that pressure, for minor issues, and you're basically disrupting the entire system.
Okay.
But tomorrow's one, I am not sure which direction it will go. But what I can see is, till budget, there can be many more protests. But
no, in terms of stability, what do you think about? It won't affect the government stability. No, just people come to Colombo.
Yeah, it won't at this point, because they have the 2/3 majority. Yeah. And it's if it builds pressure, it will be over a period of time. Yeah. I mean, just because it's too early to to have a protest coming to Colombo and really build pressure to the government, in my view.
Yeah, and I mean, the president is still very popular.
He's popular.
Like his approval rating, we don't have approval ratings here, right? But I think if we did, his popularity is high.
Yeah.
But not necessarily the governments. I mean, government, I think is popular, but he's seen as a sort of the one-man army, and a few others in the government are not so popular. But I don't think there's a risk of anything happening.
Yeah, I think because it's it can lead to a series of other conversations, but at the moment, as I said, since they haven't done anything wrong and people really haven't feel any pressure in the sense, of course, after the economic crisis, everyone went through quite a bad period of time. But because of their decisions, people haven't felt anything, any pressure. For example, when there's a fertilizer ban, farmers felt it. When there were no gas at the shop, people felt it. But there's nothing like that. So I don't. I don't think there'll be any one protest can completely.
I mean, I think it could inspire confidence in the government if it's a flop.
Is it flop? Yes, yes.
If absolutely. They don't get the number of people they want.
Yeah, but my advice would be, don't forget about the growth, because without growth, you are basically coming back to square one, and that will be question. First term now, first year is done. When it comes to second year, third year, the pressure is going to mount up. If you don't do the growth, then that's where the job opportunities.
And people will lose patience. Right?
Exactly, and you have to feel. You need to feel the income increase and things like that, and convenience in life, like the public transport, the train services. Those are important things, because otherwise there can be a minor shock that can completely. Because for a minor shock, you have to change things and you have to fasten the seat belts, and then you feel the pressure, and that can be capitalized by many other, fractions. So that would be my, that's my line of thinking.
Yeah. I think their sort of premise for this whole thing is also a bit shaky about this protest and all of that. So will be interesting to see. But so good chat today.
Good chat.
We did the first one. So Yeah.
I think there are a few more. We'll take it up in the next conversation. There was a big conversation about money printing, whether there's money has been printed, and few others as well, like export development and credit card numbers have grown.
Yeah.
I think, but we can discuss all that in the next episode.
No? Okay, great. Thank you, Dhananath.
Thanks, Charindra. Thank you very much.